Thank you for making it to our final chapter, which is all about camera and backgrounds. Now, I've been looking back at our previous chapters, and I noticed that so far, the technique that's helped us out the most across all of our chapters, which we've used more than any other technique, has been the ability to contain symbols inside other symbols. From our first chapter, where we learned how to stagger our arm movement from the body, to the third chapter, where we simplified our timeline by containing a face, a body, and a mask into one symbol, to the fourth chapter, where we took nesting to its peak in order to make complex body movements. All of this has a common theme, and that theme is grouping the elements of a character's body. In this final chapter, we're going to take that to the next level. We're going to group not just the parts of a face or a character or even multiple characters. This is the chapter where we group the entire world that our characters live in. Welcome to Chapter 6, Camera and Background. Let's get started. I've reopened the animation we made in Chapter 5 when we animated a run cycle from scratch. In this page, we're going to give this run cycle a body and a location. That way, by the end, we'll have a looping background with a shaking camera. Now, the way that this run cycle file that we've opened is set up is that this top layer contains the two instances of a run cycle graphic. That's the run cycle that we animated ourselves in Chapter 5. So this layer has two instances of that graphic, where one instance has a start frame of 1, and the other one has a start frame so that it plays early by half of a cycle. Now the first thing we'll do is select these two symbols here, and then press F8, or modify convert to symbol. And we'll name this symbol running character, with type set to graphic. After that, we'll double click into this new graphic and select frame 16. I'm going to press F5 to extend this new graphic to be able to play the whole run cycle. After that, I'm actually going to press F8 again, or hit modify convert to symbol. And we'll name this one body container, once again with type set to graphic. I'm going to hit OK, and then we'll double click into this graphic. You can see at the top here, we have this breadcrumb trail that shows that we are 2 levels deep. Not only are we inside of running character, but we're also inside of body container. Once again, we'll select frame 16 and press F5. And that's going to once again extend this to be able to play the whole run cycle. Now we'll add a layer above the legs. I'm going to resize this panel so that it's slightly smaller. We're going to bring in a character body from the BFDI assets. Now, I think we've done Blocky too many times, so we're going to choose a different character. In this case, I'm going to the library, and I'm navigating to find body parts, characters, and in this case, we're going to do golf ball. So I'm going to select golf ball quick and drag that onto the stage, onto our new higher layer. Now, this symbol golf ball quick is designed so that it's easy to set up a golf ball with a masked pattern to it. And that's what we've placed on the stage here. So this single symbol contains both the pattern and the mask used to contain this pattern, all within one symbol, unlike golf ball body, which just has the base circle shape. So this makes it a very convenient symbol to use if we're going to set up golf ball running. Next, we'll add a new layer above golf ball quick, and we'll build our character's face in this layer. So I'm actually going to navigate to find the face assets by going to eyes, and then bringing in eye surprised right. And what I'll do to create the other eye is to hold Alt and Shift while dragging to duplicate it in a straight line. Now this one, we'll select the swap symbol button and swap this with eye surprised left. After we transform these eyes to put them in the place that we want them, we'll bring in a mouth. So once again, in the library, I'm going to search for mouths inside of the folder called body parts. In this case, I'm going to bring in smile teeth big. That's the one that I consider to be appropriate for this project. And then I'm going to use the transform tool to transform it in the way that I want. So now we have 3 layers. On the top layer, we have our face. In the middle layer, we have golf ball quick. And on the bottom layer, we have the running motion that we created earlier. Now, that was a lot of steps, but now we finished everything that we need inside of Body Container. We can play it, and we can see that it's missing a component to it that we need. It's missing that vertical motion that a runner needs, and we're going to add that right now. We can't make our cool-looking camera without a convincing-looking subject. So I'm going to double-click to exit out of Body Container, and now, having exited out of that graphic, instead of being 2 graphics deep, we're now just 1 graphic deep, and we're editing the graphic called Running Character. I'm going to search for the frames where the feet are touching the floor. Those we want to freeze in place. So in this case, it's going to be frame 5 and frame 6, where I'm placing keyframes. And the same with frame 13 and frame 14. And now these same keyframes we can actually make to be the endpoints of our tweens. So if frame 6 is where our character leaves the ground, and frame 13 is where our character hits the ground once again, then we should place a keyframe at frame 9, let's say. And that'll be the peak of our character's jump. So I've got our zoom set to 200%, and I'm going to hold shift and press the up arrow key. Now let's select a span of frames like this, overlapping this keyframe that we made. And then I'm going to right click and create classic tween, creating 2 classic tweens here. Now we'll select the first tween and go to the properties panel where we'll change the ease to a cubic ease out, and then select the second tween and change that ease to a cubic ease in. So once again, the first tween is a cubic ease out, and the second tween is a cubic ease in. So now we've got one of our 2 jumps in our run cycle. Now the other jump is a little bit awkward since it crosses over the end and loops back to the beginning, but we've got a way to solve that. Let's move the playhead to frame 1, and then use shift up arrow key to move our character to the peak. Then we'll right click this keyframe and create classic tween. And we're going to change this falling tween's ease to a cubic ease in. Now for the movement upwards, which is at the end of this loop, we're going to put a keyframe at frame 16 and then press shift up arrow key again. But now we'll use down arrow key a couple of times since we're 1 frame before our character's peak. Yeah, somewhere around there should be good enough. Now we'll right click the second to last keyframe and create classic tween and change this tween's ease to a cubic ease out. Now we've animated our character jumping into this peak here before returning back to their standing position at the bottom here on frame 5. Alright, so now let's play what we've got. I'm going to enable the loop preview and drag this loop to cover the whole loop here. Look at that, we've now got a beautiful running motion. It'll go perfectly with our looping background, and that comes next. Now that we've set up the focal point of our animation, it's time to fill in the rest of our scene with some context. After all, even if you have the world's best running animation, your scene still won't be complete until you fill in everything that's not the runner. If you picture a runner in your head, or even if you search up actual photos of athletes performing, you're almost always going to see them in an athletic setting. I'm going to agree with you that animating a character alone is hard enough, but the thing that's too easy to forget is that without the things in the background to set the stage, all you've got are some moving shapes. It's the background and the setting where your character lives that transforms the piece from just an animation test to a scene with living, breathing characters. That's why for this runner, we need to add things for our character to run past. If we leave our character in the void and just have an empty space for our character to move, well then all we have are some disembodied body parts. Zombie legs and zombie bodies are just unnaturally brought to life. Maybe we can trust the viewer to figure out things in their head, or to do the work of realizing that this is a character running through space. But if we add a place for this character to run, then maybe that'll help complete the illusion and make our animation look so much more convincing. If we complete this piece with a location for our character to run through, then maybe we don't need to wonder if our viewer can put the pieces together in their head. We can do that for them. Adding a convincing background is how we're going to ensure that our animation looks real. So what we'll do is we'll start by changing the dimensions of our stage. I'm going to resize this window to be more visible. But here in the properties panel, what we'll do is we'll make this stage square shaped. So we'll change the size from 640 by 360 to just 360 by 360. I'm going to exit back onto the main timeline and we can see the change that's been made. Now what we can see here is that the background's still sticking off the edge of our screen, but what I want to see is the actual square shape that it's going to look like. Now, Adobe Animate has this feature that's kind of hidden within all of its menus, but I use this feature so much that I've given it a keyboard shortcut. If we go to View, Magnification, Clip to Stage, that'll hide everything that's off the edges of our screen. It sounds kind of basic, but in my opinion, this is an essential part of making an animation. It's way too easy to draw things and create a beautiful background, only for it to get chopped off the edge of the stage. Now, the insidious part of working in any art program that lets you see off the edge of the stage is that you forget. You see the beautiful background that you've drawn and you get lulled into a false sense of security that all the details you've added are going to be seen. But what we need to remember is that anything that's off the edge of the screen won't get seen. It sounds kind of obvious, but it's kind of hard to put into practice. Everything we do within Adobe Animate is to serve the final product, which is our animated video file. If we live inside of Adobe Animate and spend too much time in the program, it's way too easy to forget that not every shape is going to get seen. We can spend our time or exert our energy on something that'll just spend a 24th of a second on the screen, but if we draw anything outside of the edge of the screen, it'll just get thrown away. There's definitely value to drawing safe margins off the edge of the screen, but the reason I really recommend getting familiar with view, magnification, clip to stage is so that we don't lose sight of the end result. We can't forget that this rectangle is everything our viewers are going to see. Now, with that said, I'm just going to disable clip to stage just so that our stage is easier to work with. Now let's scale up our running character and put it in the right place to leave room for a horizon in the background. Then we'll choose a layer that's lower than our character. And in this case, I'm going to add a new layer. And we'll make sure that our stroke is set to no stroke and that our fill is set to white. And with the rectangle tool selected, we'll draw a white rectangle to represent the ground. And I'm actually going to resize this so that our character's head is peeking over the edge of the horizon. And the reason we want the character's head to peek over the edge is just to give our scene some extra depth. Now I'll add a new layer above our white rectangle. So this is our white rectangle and I'll add a new layer above that. We're going to change our toolbar's fill color to a light gray. In this case, it's going to have that hex code of 6 C's in a row. And I'm going to resize this window to show a new button that we'll see if we select the oval tool. Let's make sure that this button, Object Drawing, is not enabled but disabled. And now we're going to use the oval tool to draw some bushes. I like drawing from the center and holding Alt. But you don't have to do that. The most important part is to hold Shift to keep these ovals as circles and not as ovals with a different width than their height. Instead, we're just going to keep these as circles. And with the oval tool, with object drawing mode disabled, we're going to draw these bushes here. Maybe this bush is going to have 4 circles within it. That is our second bush. And we're just going to keep going until we have 4 bushes. And like that, that is 4 bushes. Finally, I'll select the whole layer and press F8 to convert it to a symbol. Let's just call this bushes and hit OK. Now, these 4 bushes are contained within one symbol. With the selection tool activated, I'll double click into this symbol and make one last change. Let's deselect everything, and I'm going to zoom out to fit everything within our viewport here. And I'm going to chop off the bottom edge by selecting a rectangle and then hitting backspace. Now with nothing selected and the selection tool still activated, I'm going to add back some curvature by dragging these bottom edges downward. So you can see that I'm dragging within the middle of this edge to add a curve to it. Just like that, these bushes now have a curvature at the bottom of their chopped edge. And that'll add a natural curved edge, as if these bushes are pushed against the ground, but they're still bulging through the 3rd dimension. Finally, we can exit back to the main timeline. Now what we'll do is we'll make sure the selection tool is still active, and we'll hold down Alt and Shift while dragging the bushes symbol horizontally. And we'll drag this duplicate far enough to the right that it looks like an extra long row of bushes. Now we can select both of these instances and convert that to a symbol. We're going to call this tiled bushes, and I'll hit OK to convert these 2 instances into one symbol. Our next step is to animate this row of bushes to slide to the left over time. We want to contain this tweened motion inside of a graphic. So we'll select tiled bushes and convert that to a symbol by pressing F8. And we'll call this one moving tiled bushes. And type should be set to graphic. Now with this graphic created, let's double click inside of moving tiled bushes and add a keyframe at frame 17. Now we'll enable onion skin. What we're about to do is move our second keyframe far enough to the left that it's like one of the 2 bushes instances has gotten swapped with the other. So I'll hold Shift while dragging tiled bushes, and I'll line it up with our onion skin preview. Just like that. Now I can disable onion skin, and then right click somewhere after the first keyframe to create classic tween. That's our bush motion. Now, if I were to be on the last frame and I skipped back to the first frame, you can see how it's kind of like a relay race where one of the 2 instances gets swapped in with the other one. I'm going to resize this window once again to reveal this button here for loop preview. Now, if I enable the loop preview option and play this 17 frame timeline, what you can see here is that the bushes subtly freeze for an extra frame as the timeline loops over. And that's because what we've made has an extra frame. The part where one copy of the bushes gets swapped with the other copy is actually totally motionless, unlike the tweened motion in the rest of the timeline. That's why we've placed our second keyframe on frame 17 instead of frame 16. It's time now to select frame 16 and add a keyframe there. And then we'll right-click frame 17 and remove frames. Now, if we play our 16 frame loop, we can see that the subtle pausing is gone and we've got a perfect loop. But of course, we can still see that jumping motion when the loop resets, so our loop actually isn't perfect at all. Let's disable the loop preview option and double click back out to the main timeline. The issue with our background is how the edge of our tiled background is still visible, so when it goes to reset, you can still see that edge jump into place. This is the reason why we made 2 copies of our bushes graphic. Since we have 2 perfect duplicates of our background, we're now able to hide that jumping transition by making sure that the one copy that's about to disappear is fully off the stage first, and that the place where the next copy is going to appear is also off the edge of the stage. Everything that I said about the edge of the stage, how it's so cruel that it throws away everything that we've drawn outside of it, that's now here to help us. What we'll do is we'll now move the playhead to frame 1, and we'll drag our moving tiled bushes graphic so that the left edge of the leftmost bush is off of the left edge of the screen, like that. Now, if we scrub the playhead to the last frame, hopefully our rightmost bush should also be off of the right edge of the screen. And if it's not, we can safely scale our entire tiled moving bushes graphic so that it's large enough for one copy of bushes to cover the whole width of the screen. So now, if we've made sure that the first frame has a bush bleeding off of the left edge, and the last frame has a bush crossing the right edge, then that means we should now have a seamlessly looping background. It's time, once again, to go to View, Magnification, Clip to Stage, and enable Loop Preview also, and drag that loop to cover the whole timeline so that we can see our looping background in its full beauty. Beautiful. We've now completed our full moving background, and it loops too. With the background and the whole scene to compare it to, our running character now looks like they're really moving fast. Can we take this background further? Can we take this to the next level? We can. Time to make this background 3D by adding parallax. That's when the camera's moving, so objects are moving across the screen, but far away objects are moving slower, whereas objects that are closer to the camera move faster. And then close-up objects move the fastest. Now, the specific way that we've set up this tiled moving bushes background has actually been made for this purpose. Time to add some extra depth to our scene by duplicating this tiled bushes graphic to make new layers of bushes. I'm going to disable View, Magnification, Clip to Stage, just so we can see everything once again. With the Transform tool activated, we'll hold Alt and drag moving tiled bushes downward slightly. And then what we'll do is we'll hold Shift and then drag one of these corners of this transform rectangle to scale it a bit bigger. Because we've contained our bushes and the bushes movement inside the same symbol, we can actually enlarge the bushes and make them move faster in the same step. I'm actually going to open up the transform panel so we can manually set the scale to 200%. Now, we're free to position our closer bushes as high or low as we want, but the only restriction is that, once again, we can't let the left or the right edges of our tiled bushes to be visible. Because this graphic has 2 sets of bushes, we want to make sure that the swapping of one set with the other set is off screen. Let's bring the playhead to frame 1 just to be sure. Now, as long as the left edge of those bushes extends past the left edge of the screen, which it definitely is here, we can be sure that the bushes that disappear at the end of our loop are fully out of sight. So just like this, we can see how there isn't any foul play occurring within this black stroked rectangle. And I can even bring it closer like that. So now you can see here, this is really close to the edge here. And that first copy disappears, but it's still off the screen as it disappears. So now if I enable the loop preview option and I hide the edges of the screen by going to View, Magnification, Clip to Stage, you can see that swapping isn't visible at all. You can see there isn't any popping visible within the stage. All right, I'm going to disable that clip to stage option, and I'm also going to disable the loop preview option. Now, beautiful, we have 2 layers of bushes. It's now time to add a third one, and this one is going to be smaller. this is going to be one that's further away from the camera. Let's hold Alt and drag the original bushes upward a bit. They actually don't have that much room to move upward since we're already pretty close to the horizon here. You can barely see the horizon, but there it is there. So we don't want these bushes to be above the horizon. These are not floating bushes, these are natural bushes. So I'm going to make sure that these bushes stay rooted within this white rectangle so that they don't go above the horizon. Now we'll scale it to be smaller. This is the part where we have to be careful. We only have so much room to shrink these bushes, since the most we can possibly show is the full group of 4 bushes. We don't want anything more than those 4 bushes to show up, because otherwise we're going to see some bushes disappear. Those 4 bushes are the safe region that we have. So I'm going to scale these down. I'm actually going to bring these off of the horizon just so we can see how much room we're working with. You can see that if I bring these 4 bushes to be small enough so that more than those 4 bushes show up, we actually are going to run into some popping here. Actually, I'm not really sure what's going on there. It looks like we have a little bit more than 4 bushes to work with. But just like that, we can scale them smaller. And the smaller we scale them, the more risk we run into of seeing that popping happen. So yeah, now you can see some popping occurring. As long as we can keep one set of these bushes within the stage, we should be safe. So you can see that this copy of the bushes here is about to disappear, but since it's fully off of the stage, it won't lead to any popping and we're safe, just like that. Now, as one group of bushes disappears and teleports back to the right side, we need to make sure that the other group is still large enough to cover the whole screen in the meantime. So I'll hold Shift and shrink this graphic to the size that we want, while still being careful to make sure that those 4 bushes are wider than our canvas. And here they are, still wider than our canvas. Alright, so I'm going to drag this down once again to be a little bit more realistic, where the bushes are still on the ground and not above the horizon, like that. Boom. Look at that, 3 sets of bushes at what looks like 3 different depths. Now in front of this background that's outside of the stage, it's pretty easy to see the layers of bushes, but let's double check just so we can see what our viewer is actually going to see. We'll go to View, Magnification, Clip to Stage once again to shrink what we can see to just the canvas. That is all we can see. If we can limit what we see to just what the viewer sees, then I think that'll give us a much more realistic idea of what the final product is going to look like. Now, looking at it, it's kind of chaotic, it's kind of messy. Just within that canvas, we've got a lot going on, and it's kind of hard to tell what's happening. This is where we bring in another technique, fog. Now, some people call this atmospheric perspective, but I prefer fog. All this really is making faraway things hazier. It's making them more tinted to the color of the sky. That's why I'm so glad that we made each layer of bushes contained fully inside of a graphic. If we had left these as tweens, then we'd have to worry about changing both a start frame and an end frame. But since this is all contained within one thing, we can just change that and we don't have to worry about making other things change the same way just to match. Storing the whole motion inside of tweens has helped us a ton, letting us change both the size and the speed in one go, and now we get to change the color in one go too. We'll select the furthest layer of bushes, so that's the smallest one here, and we'll point our eyes to the properties panel. Let's go to the color effects section, and we'll change the drop down from none to brightness. And by raising this slider to 100%, we can turn these bushes white, and that'll make their silhouettes really stand out. But instantly we can see a problem here. Our bushes all being the same color actually hid something from us. Those bushes that were supposed to be the furthest back actually were in front of all the other bushes the whole time. So the way we'll solve this is by right-clicking this instance and going to Arrange, Send to Back, or by pressing Command-Shift down arrow or Control-Shift down arrow. Now our faraway bushes look like they're distant silhouettes, which stands out super nicely from both the sky and the middle row of bushes. Time to bring out the frontmost bushes. Let's select the largest graphic and go to Color Effects, Brightness, and bring down the brightness slider pretty much to give the opposite effect as the faraway bushes. Now, even though it might not be realistic, making things that are close to the camera be darker is a super easy way to give them a super defined silhouette, and that'll really add a sense of depth to your scene. It's kind of like you filmed something super close, like so close that your camera was casting a shadow on that object. It definitely doesn't apply to all scenes, especially not this one where our character is even closer than the bushes are, but making closer things darker is just another tool you can add to your tool belt. In this case, I actually think that a dark gray looks kind of boring and dry. So I'll actually switch our color effect from brightness to tint and give this a sort of bluish greenish color. This one. There we go. Now, all 3 layers of our bushes have these clearly defined silhouettes. Even when we use the clip to stage option to restrict our vision and see just what the viewer sees, it's still easier than ever to see what's what. And that's all because we've changed the colors to bring out these silhouettes. So now we have a perfectly crafted 3D looping background. Time to add the final puzzle piece. The thing that'll tie this all together is a subtle camera shake. In the next page, we're going to go over the simplest, most useful way to add emphasis to a scene by adding camera shake. The steps that I'm going to show you are the ones that you can whip out and use in any situation to instantly add a sense of action or movement to a scene. If your animation feels still or lifeless, when you'd like to give off a sense that, whoa, something's happening, then something you can add is camera shake. This is when you change a scene from one that has a stable camera to one where the camera is constantly moving subtly. Even though there's no noticeable beginning or end to this camera motion, and no point in time where you can pick out which way the camera is moving, the constant motion of this camera breaks up the feeling of solidness when the camera is perfectly still. If you've got an animation where you want things to move in a more natural way, to give off a more in the wild kind of look, like someone just whipped out their phone and started filming, then maybe a camera shake is what you need. We're going to add a camera shake. This part is all about adding chaos to an otherwise static animation, but in order for that to be noticeable, we need to add things that the viewer will know are static. That way the viewer's eye has something to compare to, and something that'll help the viewer notice that our camera is shaking. Now, from looking at our animation, we can see that the parallax effect we've made, where some bushes are moving faster than others, and the further away bushes are moving slower, gives a major hint as to where the camera is and where it's pointing. The next step we can take to really lock in the pattern of fast, medium, slow for each row of bushes is to add an unmoving 4th layer. That's going to be the sky, which is infinitely far away. Technically, our characters running is causing them to move past the sun and the clouds, but we're going to give the impression that they're so far away that any amount our character runs doesn't matter. And that's going to really sell the depth effect we're going for. So we'll create a new layer beneath our white rectangle. And we'll use the oval tool to draw a white circle. And that'll act as our sun. I'm just going to position it there. Next, we'll add some clouds. Now, to match the abstract style of our animation so far, we're going to make them white stripes that cross over the whole screen. We'll activate the rectangle tool and change the toolbar's fill color to a white color that's 50% transparent. Now we'll draw some stripes. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to make the ones that are closer to the camera start out wider, but then become narrower as they approach the horizon. So I'm going to leave an empty space for the sun, but you can see that the rectangle at the top is the thickest, and the ones near the horizon are thinner. Like that, I have now drawn 3 stripes. Even when our background is so abstract, we can still use the rules of perspective to communicate what we want. In this case, it's a flat plane representing the layer of clouds in the sky. Now, with our clouds and our sun in place, let's add one more static object. That's going to be the shadow underneath our character. Since the running is causing them to bounce up and down, it's kind of hard to tell where they are relative to the ground. That's the job of the shadow that we're going to add. Let's find our character, which is on the topmost layer. We'll add a new layer, which will be directly underneath the top layer. I'm going to change our fill color to be 20% opaque. And then we'll make this fill color a sort of dark bluish color. Now, with the oval tool activated, I'm going to draw an ellipse in our new layer, and I'm going to hold Alt to draw from the center of it. We want it to be aligned with the center of our character's body, since that's the part that's doing the most to contribute to that shadow on the ground. Now, I can scrub through our frames to see where our character's feet make contact with the ground, like that. And we can use that as a guide for positioning our shadow. Now we have our scene fully set up with static elements that are going to show off our shaking camera super clearly. Let's select all of our frames across all of the layers, right-click, and copy frames. Now we'll go to Insert, New Symbol, and name this symbol Running Scene with type set to Graphic. We'll right-click on the empty frame and paste frames. Now we'll exit back to the main timeline, make a new layer, open up the library, and drag our running scene symbol onto the stage. Now let's try to align it with our original layers. I'm going to disable this clip to stage option just so we can see things super clearly. And we're going to align this symbol with the original layers that made it up. Finally, we can select all of those original layers and delete them, leaving just our new symbol. Now we have everything in one symbol, which we can transform and rotate and scale however we want. Let's select all of the frames on this layer and then press F6 to convert those frames into keyframes. time to finally add that shaking motion. Here's a super quick way to do that. We'll move our playhead to frame 1, and we'll select our graphic, and then randomly mash the arrow keys. Then we'll move to the next frame by pressing the greater than key, or the period key, and we'll click on our graphic and once again mash the arrow keys. We'll continue this cycle of advancing to the next frame by pressing the greater than key, clicking on our graphic and mashing the arrow keys until we've gotten to the last frame. We're using our keyboard mashing as a random number generator. In my opinion, that's pretty wild. We're taking entropy from the real world and feeding that into our animation. Now, after we've gone through all of our frames, we can play our animation. And look at that. That animation we've just made is one of a kind. There will never be another animation like it. Well done. Our shaky writing animation is complete. And if you want, you can add motion lines or any other details you like. It's time for a more interesting camera shake that you can make by using what I'm going to call the countdown technique. I've opened up the blocky jumping animation from chapter 4, body movements, because I think there's something more we can add to really make this jump look more exciting and epic. Now, you don't have to use this exact animation. You could make your own animation of some character landing on the ground and it'll totally work for this section. We want to make this landing feel super powerful, like this impact has just hit the ground so hard that this person holding the camera gets knocked off their feet. The thing is, unlike the last camera shake we made, this unsteady motion is going to be in one direction. The camera shake that we're about to make has the camera swinging up and down a number of times before the swinging motion essentially fades out. The first thing I'll do is add a new layer and drag it to the bottom. I'll draw a white rectangle to represent the ground. And any other details I add to this layer are just going to be part of our background. What we're doing by adding a background here is just adding more details that we can use to see this camera motion. Now with our background layer done, we should now have a few different layers. Some of them are going to be different parts of our character, while one of them is for the background. We'll select the top layer and hold Shift while selecting the bottom layer to select all of these different layers, and then we'll cut frames. Then we'll go to Insert New Symbol, and I'll name this Impact Container, and make sure that type is set to graphic. I'll click OK, and then I'll right click the empty frame and paste frames. Finally, exiting back onto the main timeline, we'll add a new layer and drag Impact Container onto the stage, and we'll try to align it to match what our original layers looked like, and then I'll remove those original layers. Now we'll search for the frame where our character's feet first make contact with the ground. That's the frame where our impact is the strongest, and all the layers after that only grow weaker. And that's going to be on frame 13. Because when you've got an impact like this, the most important part is the first frame, or the first few frames. That's where the original energy of that thing that's making the impact unleashes all of its energy into the camera, essentially. And any movement that happens after that is the original movement sort of continuing until it finally wears off and disappears. We'll select the frames starting with frame 13 and then ending on frame 23, and then press F6 to convert them into keyframes. This is where the countdown comes into play. To represent that first powerful impact, let's select the first of these keyframes and then press the down arrow key 5 times. Then we'll select the second keyframe and press the up arrow key 5 times. After that, we'll select the next keyframe and press the down arrow key 4 times. And then select the next keyframe and press up 4 times. So each keyframe gets moved less and less compared to the keyframe before it. Now let's finish off this whole string of keyframes. We'll move this keyframe down 3 times, and this one up 3 times, and then down 2 times, and up 2 times, and then down 1, and finally up 1. And that means the last keyframe is untouched. So now if we play this, you can see how natural that camera shake is, how it bounces up and down, but then fades away over the course of multiple bounces. And we managed to do that by first making a series of keyframes, and then nudging them with the arrow keys. The first one getting nudged the most, and then counting down to keep track of how to nudge it less over time. And if I move the playhead to the last keyframe, click the colored rectangle here to switch this layer to outline mode, and then enable onion skin, you can see how our countdown technique created an equal number of keyframes that were nudged above and below our original location. And if we step through these frames, we can see that container graphic bouncing up and down less and less each time before settling in the middle. I'm going to disable onion skin and take this layer out of outline mode. I actually think this camera shake is too short, and not only does it decay too soon, but those individual bounces are too fast to be realistic. Let's go over a rule that I'm going to introduce when you're dealing with a camera in Adobe Animate. When you make a virtual camera by putting your scene inside of a container graphic, that graphic must include everything that the camera sees, including the background and the sky. And anything that's not in real life is going to stay outside the symbol and be layered on top. Things like this include motion lines, darkened edges, which is also called a vignette, and graphics and text that are on the screen. Now, things that aren't necessarily real but are still attached to objects, like glowing gradients, light rays, pointers, and speech bubbles, those things still make sense to include inside your container, just so it's easier to keep them synchronized with whatever real-life thing it's attached to. Now, imagine a single graphic containing two characters. If we cut between the two characters, sometimes it can be hard to tell where one is compared to the other. When that cut happens, the viewer might think, where am I now? Where was I earlier? We can communicate a lot more to the viewer if we smoothly move it, and since they're on the same canvas, the way we move the graphic is a no-brainer. Now, a lot of the time you won't be able to put all your characters in the same canvas. Our characters might be on two different backgrounds. However, we can still give the illusion that our characters are in the same room by faking that same sweep of the camera. The sneaky thing we'll do is when the camera is moving the fastest, we'll switch the first background with the second one. The key to this technique is that both the before and after graphics move in the same direction. This is a useful technique that I think that you can employ in any animation that you make. I'm just filming this right now off the top of my head. Well done for making it to the end of Object Animator's Toolbox. You have done an amazing job, and the fact that you made it to the end is just incredible. I just want to say thank you so much for making it to the end and going through every chapter. I really appreciate it. I don't know what else to say, but thank you. This has been Michael Huang, and I'll see you next time.